Hey, what's up, everybody? Rath here with the Week 7 college fantasy football, the early slate analysis, strategy, advice, everything you need to know for the Week 7 early slate on FanDuel and DraftKings. Recording a video here on Thursday night. Welcome into rotocurve.com. As we always say in the beginning of these videos, if you have not signed up at rotocurve.com, please do. All our free videos, content, our forums, and our chat room. All the expert advice that you need in the industry to win at daily fantasy sports. We got NBA coming up soon, so just be on the lookout for that. We're going to have a lot of learning curve videos, strategy videos on how to win and play on daily fantasy basketball. Let's get into the college football this week, and as we always do, we're going to do a screen share with Excel. Switched up a little bit this week, made the Excel a little bit prettier. Hopefully it's easier to read for you guys, and probably narrow down some of the plays. Not going to go outside the box so much this week. We're going to go and tighten it up, and let's win some money. Did pretty good last week. I know some of the GPP plays didn't hit, but a lot of the cash games did. So did very well in cash, but GPPs have been a tough nut for me. I'll definitely admit that. I hit a couple big ones earlier in the season, but it's been one of those things where there's so many players in the player pool that if you don't hit the nuts in the GPP for college football, it can be kind of tough. But again, cash games is where it's at. 80% of your action, in the cash games. Grind out the money every single week in cash games. I can say I've done very well in those this year. Let's go ahead and switch over. All right, guys, here we go, like we always do with the slate. Started off top to bottom with the games with the highest total. Got a little bit better color action going on here. We got the greens. We know those are good. Show you what site the games are on. And then we got the differentials. And again, we're looking for greens. The darker the green, the better. Reds on defense are teams that we can exploit. Reds on offense mean the team is bad. So as you can see, we have the way the totals work, it really coincides and correlates with you have the passing differential on the passing teams is pretty high on the heavy favorites and on the higher scoring games. So that's always a good sign. And we put some of the teams in green that we're going to focus on. So let's get into it. First game of the day, as far as where we're going to go, where we're going to focus, the game of the week is East Carolina and Tulsa. So again, we got a pretty big number here in terms of 78 total. We got a projected game score of around 46-32, and some familiar players in this game, and some guys we haven't necessarily been on. We've ridden Tulsa most of the time that they've been on the board. Last time out, did not do great with Tulsa. It definitely was a struggle the last time that they played. That we used them, but again, they get East Carolina here. East Carolina's defense isn't the greatest in the world, and this game should be a shootout. I'm not scared by the 13.5. I think that for me is right in line. Again, we got a monster game here. Doesn't look like East Carolina's really going to run the ball that much. They've got a pretty weak rushing offense, even though Tulsa's run defense isn't that great. But again, elite passing offense. And Tulsa's defense is not very good. Tulsa's rushing offense is pretty good, so we have an edge there. And Tulsa's passing offense we know is elite. So, on paper, kind of looks like to me Tulsa's in a really good spot here to cover the number, keep the game close, which is definitely what I like. East Carolina quarterback situation is a bit mucky. Not so, just murky, mucky, whatever you want to call it. Not the greatest, which kind of sucks coming into this game. Do like some guys on the Tulsa side, and I think that's where we're going to be playing. We're going to be playing some guys on Tulsa. A couple guys on East Carolina that I like that we can get into, but the quarterback situation is a little bit sketchy. Right now they're running out 2 quarterbacks, which definitely makes it tough. But I do think one of their quarterbacks is in play, and we'll talk about that later. Second game on the board we want to focus on, especially is on the Texas Tech side. Everybody destroys Kansas. The line is 31. Total is 77.5, 54.5 to 23 projected total. Huge differential here on the rushing. We see that Kansas is one of the worst teams in the country against the run. And obviously, Texas Tech's passing attack is number 1 in the country, and Kansas is one of the worst defensive pass defenses in the country. So, again, huge opportunity here in terms of Texas Tech. So, we're going to go with our boy Mahomes. Pretty much been rolling him out every single week. Haven't been disappointed. Don't see any reason why he can't put up another 35-point game this week. Do like the wide receivers. A running back, I think, is more of a GPP play. Really kind of up and down. When you have a monster quarterback that runs, it's really tough to project what the running back is going to do in the game because he's got to get opportunity, and it's usually at the quarterback's expense. So, you never really want to take a running quarterback with the starting running back. That'd be a suicide play. So definitely not something we would do here. But again, if you're rolling with a different quarterback, and then you're looking at, say you're rolling with Baylor or you're rolling with another one, Mississippi, etc., then I think you can roll in a tournament with Washington, the running back from Texas Tech. Otherwise, it's Mahomes. You got to lock him in, or Russell, or something like that. So, but it's really hard to get away from Mahomes this week, especially with the matchup. You got to think he's going to be heavily owned. But in cash games, I think that you're crazy if you're not starting Mahomes. Baylor, West Virginia. This is a big revenge game for Baylor as West Virginia knocked them off last year. The line is 21. It's in Baylor. And we get a 75 total. We get a 48 to 27 projected total. Good chance this number, goes over the total. Look, Baylor can put up as many points as they want. West Virginia's defense isn't bad, but they really weren't able to slow down Oklahoma, and I don't think they're going to be able to slow down Baylor. I don't know if anyone's going to at this point. Baylor, number 2 rushing offense in the country. West Virginia's defense has been okay, but not the greatest strength of schedule. Again, Baylor's going to run on anybody. It really doesn't matter. And then Baylor's passing offense, we know. Now, the key with the Baylor passing offense is that they run so much, they don't need to throw for volume. So Russell doesn't get that many attempts. He gets decent yardage and a ton of touchdowns, but he just doesn't throw the ball a ton like a Western Kentucky, a Bowling Green, a Texas Tech. So that's something that you always want to consider. I haven't recommended Russell a ton this year. Probably looks bad because he's just gone out there and dominated every single time out just about. But he has had some games where, look, you're paying almost $10,000 for him. And if he doesn't get 30, 35, it's really tough. So West Virginia here is has a pretty good running game, but then Baylor's run defense is pretty good. And then West Virginia is going to be able to throw the ball in this game. I still am not recommending. I don't think I can really trust the West Virginia quarterback or the wide receivers. They didn't make my list this week. My concern in this game is, does it get out of hand? Does Baylor just absolutely steamroll them, 50 to 17, 50 to 21? Can West Virginia actually get to 27 in this game? I do have some doubts about that. I have no doubt that Baylor can get to 48. I do worry about West Virginia. Bowling Green Akron is a DraftKings only game. We've been rolling with Bowling Green all year, and there's no reason to stop now. High total of 67.5. We got, around a 40 to 28 type game. And again, Bowling Green doesn't really run. They're not going to run. They don't have to run. They're going to throw the ball all over the field. And on the other side, not a lot going on there for the Akron. The line is 12, which is good. Hopefully this game is closer than what we expect. Although I do think that Bowling Green could absolutely wipe the mat with them. But again, we're not worried about them taking out the starters or anything like that. So Bowling Green is definitely a team that you're going to want to play on this week. Mississippi, Memphis. I did highlight Memphis, but really I think the play here is Mississippi. Line is 10.5. Over under is 70.5. So we got a total of about 40 to 30 type of game. Ignore the time start. This is an early slate. Not really a good differential on the run side, but on the passing side is where we really see things get crazy. Miss's pass offense is around 16. The Memphis defense is ranked around 123rd, so we get a huge edge. So we definitely want a piece of the Mississippi passing game here. And then on the other side, not a lot of differential for Memphis. So that's, but again, it's a high total. It's at 30. Perhaps there's some guys you want to take a look at, but again, didn't make my list this week. Indiana Rutgers, you got to like this spot because it's a low side in terms of 2.5 line with a really high total, so around a 34-32 projected game. And the Indiana run offense, unfortunately, is really kind of sputtered here. Howard's been banged up. Howard is a guy that we've kind of rolled with almost all year and had tremendous success. But he's not healthy, and I don't think this is the right spot. Now, on the other side, you've got the Indiana passing offense with a pretty big edge, and I think that's where we might want to look at something here. Now, the problem is Indiana's offense. Sudfeld is questionable. It sounds like he's going to go. That's kind of the speculation as of when I'm filming the video. The second string quarterback is definitely out. The third string quarterback is Danny Cameron, who's listed at 4,500 on FanDuel, and he's also cheap on DraftKings. Now, Danny Cameron's actually the son of Cam Cameron, who has been offensive coordinator in the NFL. So he got some bloodlines there. Now, this is a situation we're going to have to watch. The problem is the game is later on. We may not know who's going to start. If we don't know who's going to start, we can't speculate unless we're playing on DraftKings where we got late swap. But as it stands right now, my gut's telling me, based on everything I read, Sudfeld's probably going to be the guy here. He did practice, and that's really usually a key indication. So Sudfeld's a guy I think we got to look at in GPPs. I did look at the Rutgers offense, and I think that there might be one play there on the wide receiver, but I don't feel confident in the run game, and I definitely don't feel confident in the quarterback play. Washington State, Oregon State. Line is 8, over under 62.5. And, in terms of Washington State, it's obviously it's an elite passing offense and they don't run the football. So we see here, worst run offense and one of the worst run days. So that's not going to come into play. Oregon State's got a pretty good pass defense. So what that tells me is I think what we're going to be doing here, I think Washington State for me is I'm not really using any of these guys in cash games because, again, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to unload on Oregon State the way that some of these other teams and these other matchups are going to be able to do it. So if Oregon State's going to slow them down a little bit, I'm probably looking at Washington State more of a tournament play instead of cash because you got to pay up to play Washington State. And also you got to pay a heavy price to play Falk. And they spread the ball around so much on offense that on the wide receiver side, it's tough to take any of those guys in cash. So you almost usually have to take 2 of the wide receivers, although, Craycraft and Williams haven't been have huge games. It's really been kind of like the Marks show. So if I'm going with a tournament, I'm probably looking at Falk and Marks as trying to get on something that maybe not a lot of people are going to be on. Mississippi State, LA Tech. I love this game because we get LA Tech on the board. It doesn't play great D. Mississippi State minus 13, total is 60, so we got about a 36-23 type game. Mississippi State's not really running the ball. Prescott hasn't run the ball as well, but we get a pretty good edge here on the passing attack. But again, this is a game I'm not really looking at anybody in this game. I think if you want to look at potential piece, you can look at a wide receiver. But again, nothing really jumped out for me, even though the total was favorable and the passing matchup was favorable. When I did the research, nothing really stood out for me in this game. Now, as we get closer to Saturday morning in our chat room, I'll look at this game a little bit further and see if I can find more of an edge on the Mississippi State side. But as of right now, I just didn't feel great about it. I think there's a potential play on the LA Tech side, the running back that we can talk about. UMass and Kent State. UMass is actually favored in this game by 7 with a total of 56.5. So around a 32-25 type game. So we like that. We know all about UMass passing attack. They don't run the ball. They're going to throw the ball. Now, Kent's defense is actually not bad against the pass, but we're dealing with an elite passing attack in UMass, so I don't have any trouble rolling UMass guys out there this week. And we'll talk about them. You know, I love Sharp. Pretty much will roll with Sharp every single week that he's on the board. In cash games only, I'm not really looking at him in a tournament. The only time I'm looking at Sharp in a tournament, we've talked about it before, is if I'm pairing the quarterback and the wide receiver, then I got to use them both. And at that point, I might even be throwing in the number 2 wide receiver or the tight end and get a nice stack going there. So I don't have a problem doing that in a tournament. I don't even have a problem doing it in a cash game, really. Cash game rules in college are a little bit different than pro. You don't worry so much about stacking because the offenses score so many points that a lot of times it can actually pay off for you. And the tight end position is so weak that I don't have a problem rolling the UMass quarterback out there would say Sharp and even the tight end because they just don't run the ball at all, hardly ever. Now, make mention this is a FanDuel only game, so it's not in play on DraftKings. Oklahoma, Kansas State. Oklahoma was on a pretty good roll, and then all of a sudden it came to a screeching halt. And Mayfield's had a couple of shaky games. The way that I graded out Mayfield this week is, this offense has changed. Look at the running for Oklahoma. They're ranked 100th, which is crazy, and they're ranked 10th against the pass. So clearly they're going to throw the ball. This team's offense has completely changed. New offensive being installed, and clearly they're going to want to throw the ball. And Kansas State has got a pretty bad pass defense. The line is close. It's 3.5, so it should be a pretty competitive game. So I think you got to jump back on the Mayfield bandwagon here. I'm not in love with any of the wide receivers. So for me, Mayfield's probably more of a tournament play, and you hope that he bounces back. You get a little bit of salary relief, and then you hope that you can spread that money around to some other places. But definitely not going to play Mayfield in cash games until we get a better understanding. Now, the rest of these games are pretty much lower totals. Now, there is some spots and some players that I do like. I don't like anybody in the Virginia-Syracuse game, really. Nothing really stood out for me there. Alabama, Texas A&M, definitely like some guys on the Alabama side. I think Henry, is basically putting up a touchdown every single game at 100 yards. So he's like the number 1 cash game play for me in terms of running back, and I really like his price. The other guy I like for Alabama is Calvin Ridley, who's a top wide receiver prospect coming out of high school, and now he's basically getting the ball for Alabama at the wide receiver position. He's priced at $4,500 on FanDuel. That's a mistake. I think it's time for us to take advantage of that. Didn't love anything really on the Texas A&M side, of course, going against that Alabama defense. Not something that you really want to pick on. Miami and Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech plays that slow down type of game, that grind out kind of game. So I'm not looking at anybody in that. We'll do some deeper research Friday night, Saturday morning coming in to find if there's any value plays on some of these games. Really what I'm looking at is like GPP flyers, but in terms of cash games, I don't see anybody in this game. Wisconsin-Purdue does represent opportunity. I think that there's definitely opportunity as far as the Wisconsin run game has not been what it's been in the past, but Purdue's run defense is pretty bad. The situation with Wisconsin is Taiwan Deal was out last week, and Dare Agwenbale, or however you pronounce the guy's name, got the bulk of the carries and did well. The problem we have is it looks like Deal is going to play. Now, if Deal doesn't play, then obviously I'm going to call him Dare because I can't pronounce the guy's last name. So Dare is absolutely in play if Deal is out. But it sounds like Deal is going to go. He's been practicing. Maybe he doesn't get a lot of carries. Maybe Dare is still, the guy that's going to get the bulk of the carries. Definitely a situation that we're going to be monitoring on Saturday morning, as I think it's critical to get him in cash games if he's going to get the majority of the carries. So that's a situation that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. Along with that Indiana quarterback situation, we got to keep an eye on that. Minnesota and Nebraska, again, didn't really find anything here in terms of edge. When I look at differentials, Nothing really jumped out. This looks like a pretty bad game. Looks like a game that's going to be low scoring with not a lot of offense. Kind of the same with Georgia Tech Pitt. Again, nothing really stands out for me here. Florida State Louisville. Really, the play here is going to be Dalvin Cook coming back. If Dalvin Cook can come back, look, he's put up 200-yard games when he's been healthy. And that's something that, that's the kind of upside that you want at the running back situation. And, we don't get Leonard Fournette in this game set, and we don't get Nick Chubb in this game set. Obviously, Georgia's not playing, but then he's hurt. So I think, it's very tough. There's so few running backs, I think, in the slate that I think you're going to have to pay up for the good ones, and you're going to have to find value at the wide receiver position. South Carolina Vanderbilt, with everything going on right now, the South Carolina coaching situation, that's kind of a mess. And their whole team is a mess. I don't really see anything here. Michigan State, that's a defensive battle. No real edge on any of the offensive players there. And then Iowa Northwestern with a total of 41. I know we were on Kanzeri last week, and Northwestern's got a pretty good running back too in Jackson. Look, both these guys could get a ton of carries in this game. I just didn't see a huge edge, and that was one of the concerns that I had. Nothing really jumps out. And if this game is going to be completely slow down, grinded out, not a lot of points, then I'm going to look at going with some other guys in some other games. Let's get into the picks. All right. I pretty much told you everybody I like, but we're going to go over the names and the salaries and kind of where I think you should play. So I got 5 guys at cash. I got Mahomes, I got Chad Kelly, I got Seth Russell, I got Blake Frohnapple. So really, I like Frohnapple because he's going to throw, and he's still cheap at 7.9, and it kind of frees you up to pay up at some other spots. On DK, DraftKings, I love Matt Johnson. I've been recommending him every single week, and he hasn't disappointed. You're paying a hefty price at 9.6, so it's tough. If you're trying to get another quarterback in there, it can be kind of tough. But I think maybe you can roll with Kelly at 7.4 as a guy that I think is, a good pairing if you're paying up to go to Johnson. Mahomes, for me, is a lock. You got to play him almost anywhere, even in tournaments, even though he's heavily owned, it's just really tough to get off him. I love Kelly in cash because when he's played against bad teams, he's done well, and this is a good spot for him. 8.4 in FanDuel, 7.4 in DK. So you like the price break on DraftKings. I got no problem rolling him out. He's been pretty consistent. Again, his bad games were against pretty tough defenses, so you just got to bear that in mind. Seth Russell, 9.8 on FanDuel is pretty tough. 9 on DK, DraftKings. Look, the same thing with Russell. Roll him out there, he's going to get his points. It's just a matter of him not throwing the ball a lot, and that's going to always limit his upside because they run. But he does run too. And he's been getting some rushing touchdowns, so that kind of makes up for it. So, again, I don't have a problem. But I think Mahomes is my number 1 guy. Kelly is number 2. Russell, number 3. I have Johnson kind of like number 3 as well. I just put him down here because he's DK only. As far as tournaments go, I think Mayfield and Falk are guys that definitely have that upside but haven't been as consistent. Evans is in the same boat from Tulsa. We have recommended him, and we do like the matchup there. But, again, just not consistent enough where I can roll him out in a cash game, but in a tournament and when he's going to be lower owned. And then the 2 quarterback situations that are pretty crazy right now. We talked about Indiana with Sudfeld and Cameron. You got to watch the injury report, the practice reports. If Cameron does go, he definitely becomes a GPP flyer because he's so cheap. And then also the situation with East Carolina and James Summers, where they're splitting with Blake Kemp, and it doesn't look like that's going to change. The thing with Summers is that he's a running quarterback. So, if you're playing multiple entry in a tournament, I think that you can probably take a shot with Summers on one of those teams and load up everywhere else and see how it plays out. Running back position. Derrick Henry's our number 1 guy in cash. 7.3 on FanDuel, 7.3 on Kings. Dalvin Cook would be my number 2. He's more expensive, 8.9 and 9. Look, he does bring more upside, but Henry's consistency, he's got a pretty good matchup. So That's kind of what, and it allows you to do some other things. When you take a running back at 8-9, it just limits you in what you can do. We talked about Dare, again, all about watching the practice reports and seeing who's actually going to start and if Deal's going to play. Gotta like Zach Langer from Tulsa at 7'3" and 6'6". I love him in cash. Even though Tulsa throws the ball, Langer gets a ton of carries as well. Chris Hairston's a guy from East Carolina that I love the price, and he doesn't have this monster upside, but he gets carries every week and he gets production. And at 5'3", if I'm going to roll Cook, I can roll Hairston and feel pretty confident that I'm going to get a guy that's going to give me a good floor. As far as GPP running backs go, I got 3. DeAndre Washington, Texas Tech. If you look at his game logs, they're extremely good or extremely bad. Obviously, the matchup against Kansas is good. So it's just a matter of whether or not he's going to get the volume. But again, you cannot play Washington with Mahomes. You have to play a different quarterback with Washington because it's not going to be counterintuitive. It's going to be counterintuitive. Shock Linwood from Baylor. Again, opportunity is always there for 150 and a couple of touchdowns. The problem is they run the ball so much and they split carries. It's a nightmare trying to figure out who's going to get what. But again, in a tournament where I'm playing for upside, look, Linwood could easily go for 3 or 4 touchdowns in a given game and run for 200 yards. Then the other guy is Kenneth Dixon, LA Tech. He's got a really good price on FanDuel at 7. And so I like him in the tournament. Look, if you rolled with like a Washington Dixon, lower ownership combo and, maybe even a guy, throw a guy like Mayfield in there, where you're looking at just having some exposure to some lower owned guys. A little bit too expensive for me on DraftKings at 8.4, but I think it's $7K on FanDuel in a tournament. I definitely like the spot. The only thing you worry about with LA Tech is if they fall behind, how much action is Dixon going to get? That'd be the only issue. Wide receiver, we'll go with the cash games first. I think Jakeem Grant is pretty much at the top of the list because of the matchup, and then also like the price is crazy. 6'9" on FanDuel, 7.2 on DraftKings, so he really kind of jumps out to me as a number one play. Tajay Sharp, I talk about him every single week. I'll always roll him out there. Now he's FanDuel only. He's creeping up there in price. He's at 7.9, so that's a little bit more than what we normally would want to spend. But I don't have a problem doing it with a guy that's pretty much a number one target guy in college football. Josh Atkinson, to me, moves into cash. If you look at his game logs, he's been the more consistent wide receiver, especially now with Kevin Lucas out. You get him super cheap on DraftKings at 5.4. Isaiah Jones from East Carolina, we're definitely going to want some of that East Carolina offense. Even though the quarterback situation is a little scary, I think both wide receivers for East Carolina are in play. Just a matter of which ones you want to go with and what kind of salary structure you have. But Isaiah Jones at 5'9", 5'8", on FanDuel and DraftKings is definitely in play. And then Trevon Brown, we'll skip down to Trevon Brown. You get him at 4.8, 4.6. And you look at his game logs, he's got a touchdown in the last 3 games. So, to get that for a guy that's sub 5 on both sites, I like him in cash because if free, I'm going with heavy quarterback, heavy running back. I need some relief at the wide receiver position, especially if I'm going with a guy like Tajay Sharp. So if I play a Ridley and a Brown, maybe I don't, maybe take a little bit of risk, but the price is so good that I think you can't pass it up. And Ridley's really the guy at 4 or 5. Number one high school wide receiver prospect coming out. Injuries have taken place. Ridley's now getting some time, and he's shown the last 2 weeks he's put up really good numbers. So I think you got to really look at him as probably the number one play, along with Sharp and Grant. And there's some really nice cash game wide receivers this week. I feel really good about this group. The other guy I'll throw in there, and I'm not a huge fan of this guy because he's so it just hasn't really lived up to his reputation. That's Laquan Treadwell. You're paying 7.1 on FanDuel. I don't think I'm in love with that, but at 5.7 on DraftKings, I think I'm definitely going to want a piece of that action. Let's talk about GPP plays. We'll go with 5 guys here. Gabe Marks, Washington State. Love him on FanDuel at 6.6. Great price point there. Again, this Washington State, I'm not sure if the numbers are going to be there in this game versus other teams. So I can't roll Marks out in cash because I just don't know where the targets are going to go from a week-to-week basis. But again, if I'm pairing with Falk in the tournament, I got no problem doing that. Corey Coleman every week is going to be a GPP recommendation because he doesn't get a lot of targets and a lot of receptions, but he gets a lot of touchdowns. So he's very touchdown dependent. Kearis Garrett is more of a boomer bust guy. And with Kevon Lucas out, it looks like Atkinson's getting more of the volume where Garrett gets more of the red zone. So, again, more of a tournament play for me. Leonte Carew is back now from suspension with Rutgers. Had a pretty good game last week. 7-8 on FanDuel scares me. I think that's just too high. But on DraftKings, where he's only 7, I've got no problem rolling him out there in a tournament because his upside is huge. I mean, he's a guy who could potentially go off for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. The problem is the quarterback play is inconsistent, so that's something you want to be aware of. And then a guy that we talked about last week, but he was questionable coming into the week, and he didn't really play. We're going to come back with Devin Lauderdale from Texas Tech, the number 2 wide receiver. He's only 5,700 on FanDuel, 4,400 on DraftKings. For me, Lauderdale, you want to play Lauderdale on a Texas Tech stack with Grant. That would be the way that I want to play it. And you're getting really good value. You want 100% of the passing attack. And that's kind of the way I would not play Lauderdale in cash. I would be scared to boom or bust. And then tight end, not a lot really for the early slate. It's pretty thin. I mean, I really only look at 2 guys. I looked at Rodney Mills from UMass, who I absolutely love because he's 3-3. And then also Fumagalli, who we used last week because he was super cheap. Obviously, the price tag has now jumped up. So he's not as much of a bargain, but I do like him again this week. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for the Week 7 early slate review and strategy session for DraftKings and FanDuel for college football. Again, sign up at rotocurve.com for your free account, and make sure you check us out in the chat room on Saturday morning. All the late breaking news and any kind of picks that we're going to shift to. A lot of times, extra research that comes out between Friday and Saturday. We kind of jump on some different guys, jump off some different guys, and kind of lock in the lineup. And again, it's been a very profitable chat room. Guys that have been in the chat room on Saturday mornings have hit us up and told us that, hey, your late advice on rotocurve.com has really what's helped put me in the money. So again, check it out. Saturday mornings, we're in there usually around 10 a.m. Eastern to about noontime. Thanks again, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video.